This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Dataminr. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the TMF Whisperer reveals his secrets as he leaves government. The new P word for the intelligence community and beyond. And next generation acquisition for next gen tech. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The Labor Department has 5 projects in progress now using funding from the Technology Modernization Fund. Another project the department funded with TMF money is already complete. Gundeep Ahluwalia just concluded 8 years as the Chief Information Officer at Labor. He's now Executive Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at New Axis Innovations. Gundeep, welcome. Thanks for joining me. I think our friend Gary Washington might take a touch of exception to me calling you the TMF Whisperer. He has had success with the TMF as well. But what should other CIOs learn from what you and Gary have achieved in getting projects approved, in progress, and complete through the Technology Modernization Fund?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Gary's catching up, and I'm a little worried there, you know.
That's right.
I think the key mantra to our success has been the fact that TMF is not seen only as a source of funding by us, right? It is always about customer experience. It's always about improving the lives of Americans, employers, etc. I remember the first one we did was around temp visas and labor certificates, right? I mean, we used to get this currency-like paper, print it, send it through snail mail, and these people wouldn't get it, and then staple it to an application that would always land up at USCIS. Well, guess what? Now, through the TMF funding, that's the one project that we completed, it arrives like a United boarding pass, right? And you just have to go to USCIS, please proceed to the gate, and they already have your stuff there. That is the kind of digital experience that people are expecting and yearning for from the government, and that's what we pitch to the TMF board every single time. We didn't go in and say, oh, we want to move to the cloud, we want to reduce our cybersecurity vulnerabilities or anything of that nature. We always kept the ball as the American people, how we are going to improve our services, how it's going to be mission oriented. And quite honestly, that's why I came to the private sector now, because New Axis is so focused on that area as well. But that's been the key mantra behind us being successful with TMF.
What do you make of the discussion that's ongoing, not just in the executive branch, but on Capitol Hill too, about what agencies should or shouldn't do about paying the money back? That's been a great source of contention in both places.
Yeah, so I think it is, the construct should be that it should be project by project, right? For example, the visa, the labor certificate example that I gave, we shut down printing operations, and that saved us money, so we could pay it back, right? But then there are certain other places where I'll give you this poor example that I use in my team is, we have a bicycle right now. These legacy applications don't do the job or give the customer experience to the Americans that they deserve. When you change it with a motor car, well, guess what? Now the motor car requires more money than these bicycle did for maintenance, right? So it's not, there are no savings to pay things back, right? So I think it has to be a case-by-case basis, and there is no one-size-fits-all. And I quite honestly think that the TMF board does a very good job of adjudicating that and working with the department and each use case. So I think it works.
What you're getting at, though, I think, is the crux of the discussion that's going on, and it has for a number of years now, about the legacy application, getting rid of legacy stuff and bringing new things on. It's not a guarantee of a savings of money. Your analogy, I think, of the bike to motor car is a great one.
Yeah, I think it's a guarantee that it's a net plus play.
Yes.
And in the sense that the Americans will win, they will get a better service, better digital experience, faster, right? However, from an appropriation standpoint, from a congressional standpoint, it not always results in a saving. So you should be ready for that too.
Yeah. One of the things that you've experienced throughout your tenure, as I mentioned, at Labor for 8 years, which is not common as a federal CIO, you had an opportunity to work with a number of deputy secretaries and secretaries in a strategic environment and not just in a tactical. You weren't just the person that fixed phones.
Yeah.
You were a strategic partner as Viterra envisioned.
Yeah.
How did you go about making the case in a situation like that? This will cost us more, but it's worth it for these reasons.
Right. So I did go through 5 secretaries of labor, 3 different administrations, and I like you point out, I think it is always trying to connect with the outcomes, right? The policies, when parties change, they vary from one to another. However, enabling them through a digital experience does not. And regardless of who's in power, who's the Secretary of Labor, they are really, really wanting the Americans to have the best experience when they consume Department of Labor services, right? And that is true for all of them. As long as you connect your digital pathway, your strategy, your roadmap to that experience, that's my experience has been they will play with you, and that's why I've been successful with all of the secretaries of labor that I have had the pleasure to serve. When
your colleagues in other agencies come to you and say, how do you get that strategic partnership? How do you solidify that and maintain it? What do you tell them?
I always tell them, do not stop talking about pure technical plays. Do not talk about just cloud engineering and things like that. People do not relate to that, and that should never be your end goal anyways. If you connect that work and how it'll improve the customer experience or the service levels that we provide to the Americans, that is the winning mantra, and that's the way they resonate. Like, oh, okay, so the temp worker can be in this country faster, and we can have a integrity of counting them on the way in and on the way out. Well, this is great, right? Plus, we are not relying on snail mail, so that cuts down on the adjudication time. Those are the ways to talk to people and keep them interested in the digital agenda.
And position oneself then as someone who gets stuff done and changes things in a strategic way.
And it's not only the CIO, right? I mean, the program folks around me at Labor would always gather and say, like, no, we are partnering with Gundeep to do this, right? So I think that's a different dynamics than just your CIO talking about it, but then the program folks going like, oh no, I gained out of this. I want more of that.
Yeah. As I said, you were there 8 years. What do you think you were able to accomplish in that period of time just because of longevity and understanding where everything was and who worked this and who worked that and so on, that somebody who's there, the average CIO tenure, 2 years, 3 years, might not be able to?
Yeah, I think it's all about people. The reason that I was able to accomplish many things was, one, I built a team that was diverse, not only diverse from a diversity standpoint, but also thought diversity, skills, etc. But my relationship with the programs, my relationship with the Hill, right? They gave us the expiring fund sweep authority where I could take money and that is expiring at the end of the year and sweep it into a working capital fund. Then we could couple it with the TMF. But all of it was focused at delivering better services for American people. I think that is what allowed me to do it over 8 years. And that kind of focus, persistence, right? These are aircraft carriers. You can't turn them on a dime, right? So 8 years gave me sufficient time to actually make the digital infrastructure at the Department of Labor resilient enough, hopefully for the next 5 to 10 years.
What didn't you finish that you wish you would have had time to finish that you will enjoy watching get to the finish line outside the agency?
Yeah, I think what we need to continue focusing on in the future is, I think AI, self-driving cars, green jobs, all of these are going to put an enormous amount of pressure on retraining America, right? And labor has to respond to that as a department. And our digital infrastructure has to keep up with that as well. I think there is work to be done in order to be ready for that kind of revolution or a change that is coming our way, where we have to retrain almost 30–40% of our workforce in America.
Gundeep, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for your time today.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
You can read more about Gundeep's tenure at the Labor Department on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the new P word for the intelligence community and beyond. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
A lot of it's connected to the Better Contracting Initiative, where the goal is to get folks to come together and really think about the entire acquisition process early on. So those are the SAWs, the Service Acquisition Workshops, and the civilian CSAWs. So that is the key innovations, if you will. It doesn't even sound like an innovation. It's just get people together in the beginning, and it's everybody. It's program, contracting, post-award, everybody in the process.
Welcome back. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence lists 5 factors for IC components to consider to get and use publicly available information properly. ODNI's recommended those 5 factors for more than a decade now. Dana Barnes is President of Government at Dataminr. Dana, welcome. Thanks for joining me. How has PAI changed the way that people across the executive branch of the government look at information, think about it, analyze it, and use it?
PAI really has become a core component of how the government is leveraging information today. You think about the past, different methods of collecting information, different sources. Well, PAI is incredibly ubiquitous in the space. And you mentioned the intelligence community. I'm going to kind of come back to 2019. You know, the Department of Defense issued a directive, it's 3115.18 back in 2019, which effectively established PAI as an operational tool. But the other thing that they did that I think is critically important is they created a PAI advisory council. And that council's job was to make sure that the Department of Defense utilized that publicly available information in a safe and responsible way, particularly as it relates to American citizens. So now what you're seeing is other organizations doing the same thing. And it's essential. The more the government is using PAI, the more knowledgeable they're becoming about the world around all of us, particularly at the federal level.
Over the time that you've been involved in this community, DOD, for example, 2019 to 2024, that's 5 years to assemble what the best practices are around safe and responsible use of PAI. Is there a framework now, whether it's formal or informal, about what agencies should be doing to use PAI in a safe and responsible way, Dana?
Government has been really looking at how do you do this. And so depending on which agency you talk to, you might get a little bit of a different response. But in general, I would say that there is a framework, and we, from a Dataminr perspective, we look at it in terms of use cases. What are those use cases that really support the citizen, that support government, and at the same time are very responsible? So for example, are we using the PAI to surveil people? We never want to do that because that's not a good use of PAI. Are we using PAI to understand disasters and what disaster relief efforts we need to take? That's a great use case for publicly available information. Do we need to understand what's happening globally that may have local impacts? Another great use of publicly available information. You saw this in real time with the recent CrowdStrike outage, where PAI, from a Dataminr perspective, we were actually able to provide our customers and government, we have both government customers and commercial government customers, we were able to provide them an early warning almost 1 hour before the major news media outlets were about what was happening. And not only that, we continued that alerting throughout the course of the day so that our customers could understand what's happening in real time. We leveraged regenerative AI, its capability to just kind of continually summarize what's happening. And so from that perspective, it's really about the use cases and making sure those use cases are aligned. One last thing, the data providers, and there are many, many, many of them, some you're pulling the data from them, some they're serving it up to you, they often have their own view of how their data should be used. And we've been doing this for over 13 years, and we've seen that you also have to align with those data providers to ensure, you know, the safety of the citizens and the sanctity of that information that's being used.
I read that using PAI in a cyber perspective is a relatively new concept. How does that work differently or similar to the way that other types of organizations across government use PAI, Dana?
It's very similar. So when you think about it, what are you looking for when you're leveraging PAI? Insights. You want to get the information, you want to understand what's happening. So the cyber professionals can do the exact same thing that the physical security professionals are doing. And there's an interesting thing happening in this space right now. There's this convergence. You think about it as the cyber-physical convergence. And CISA has even come out and said to institutions and organizations that are considered critical infrastructure organizations, hey, we'd like you to blend your approach to security to have both a cyber focus and a physical focus coming together. And on top of that, I think this is a really interesting point. The American Society for Industrial Security did a study, and they interviewed over 1,000 CISOs, so those are Chief Information Security Officers, and CSOs, or the Chief Security Officers, about this evolution. And 73% of them said that this evolution of the combining of the physical and cyber was going to continue. 86% of them said that they felt that the person in charge of security would also eventually assume both of those verticals. So you'd have one person responsible for both physical and cyber. And that's something that I think is very, very important. So those folks can use that data in real time to get those critical insights.
We have about 15 seconds left. What's the role for artificial intelligence in helping people sort some of this stuff out, Dana?
Pretty simple. You have a mountain of data. Dataminr actually consumes over 1 million data sources to provide our alerts. Think of X as a singular source or Facebook as a singular source, all the information coming. There's no way you can get through all of that data without leveraging artificial intelligence. That's the piece, the glue that makes it all work.
Dana, it's great to have you on the show as always. Thanks for your time today.
This was fantastic. Thank you, Francis.
You can read more about PAI on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, next generation acquisition for Next Gen Tech. FedGov Today continues in a moment.
Recruiting of the workforce, it's such a diverse group. It's a much more diverse group. It was easier. The message could be far simpler, 30, 40 years ago. But now when you look at the workforce and the wide range of people that can serve in those 100,000 jobs that are needed, you need the 25-year-olds, you need the wisdom of the retired veterans that are coming back to support. But then you also want folks that really can go in for the long haul and really see and have grown up in that culture and really can bring and really embrace that culture. So you need all kinds of that variety of people, and the recruiting strategy is tough because it can't be a one-size-fits-all. It really has to be pretty diverse.
Welcome back. The General Services Administration's taking nominations now for the Acquisition Policy Federal Advisory Committee. Those nominations are open until the middle of this month. Jeff Koses is Senior Procurement Executive at GSA. At NCMA's World Congress, he explains the genesis of the advisory committee.
About 2 years ago, we stood up a first-generation federal advisory committee focused in acquisitions policy space. First generation was all about sustainable acquisition. We found it was really tremendously valuable. Got great input from so many people who want to be part of that. They gave us ideas, how do we help the workforce get ready for that? How do we help our industry partners understand that? And what are the key policy considerations we should be thinking in? That's now run about a 2-year period, and we figured, we got so much value out of this, let's keep going forward. Let's hit a second generation of the Acquisition Advisory Committee. This time we're focusing on issues in emerging tech such as AI. Francis, what we're really looking to do is focus on questions, what are the right policy guardrails? What do we need to do in the acquisition community to enable that, to give it the space to grow, to set consistent operating practices? Just saw, for example, folks dealing with questions of software license terms. Right question to ask, but we don't want to answer that one time for one procurement. We want to help lay a consistent foundation across the picture. That's really what we're trying to do with this advisory committee.
What did you learn from the first generation of the advisory committee, structurally or logistically, that you applied to the second generation, Jeff?
First generation, we quickly divided into 3 subcommittees, focused on those 3 areas, workforce, industry, and policy and practice. One thing we learned, we had a lot of people anxious to sign up to be a part of this. Second thing we learned, it would be really easy to overwhelm them. We overscheduled them, gave them too many meetings, too many tasks. And in some ways, we didn't give them as clear a roadmap as we could have of where they could be most helpful. You always want to apply the lessons you learned. What worked well? How do you replicate it? and how do you take a step and make it better? So that's what we're trying to do with Generation 2.
With Generation 2, is there an end state or an end product or end result, or is it something that will continue to evolve because of the nature of the technology that you're covering or the demands from industry and your government customers or some other reason?
There's probably an in-between. If you set a consistent set of rules of the road, that really lets AI and emerging tech thrive in the acquisition landscape. But there's going to be continuous innovation. There's going to be capability that we had not imagined today that we're going to see a few years from now. So I wouldn't say it's an end state, but it's a roadmap that we're trying to create and that we can follow.
Another project you've been working on for a long time is expanding the use of data in the acquisition process. Where do you stand on that, and what are some of the developments happening around data?
Several years ago, and actually you and I talked about it at the time, we recognized we're living in a big data world. There's incredible potential if we can start harnessing acquisition data to get to better outcomes. We said there's a way to reduce costs for industry, reduce regulatory burden, enable new entrants, make it easier for companies who've never had to deal with government to come in. But to do that, we had to get away from using a regulatory-based system, use the free market, use the power of data. That's what led us to an initiative called transactional data reporting. It was a way to use data to try and really understand what was the market prices, and we applied that across a sub-portion of the federal supply schedules. About 3,400 contracts or so were able to do to opt into that, and many of them found it hugely beneficial. So what do we do with that? First, we had to learn how do we clean up the data, what's involved in cleansing it, what's involved in standardizing it, how do we make it usable? That was a big effort. Not an easy effort, but it's yielded benefits that we had never imagined we would see. Did we get that reduced regulatory cost? We absolutely did. We expected that one. But then we started learning many of the other things we could do with the data. Small business success, for example. We have a BPA within our schedules, something called TUJITS. It's focused in IT software. And as we're starting to look and assess that data, said, hey, we're seeing the small businesses, they're not getting the share of the business we'd expect in this. The VARs, the value-added resellers of small businesses, they were not getting that business, and they should have. We only recognized that through the data. That made it actionable. As we took apart the data, we realized, hey, that's happening because they're not being offered the full product line from the OEMs that the large VARs are being offered. That was actionable. We worked with the OEMs. They expanded their approved reseller agreements to the small businesses, who now capture a majority of that spend. Third advantage we're starting to see coming out of that, cybersecurity information. We've had examples where CISA has recognized a new and emerging threat. We've been able to go into that data, reach out to the agencies who've bought those items and alert them, hey, you're buying something that CISA has now found to be a risk. That's a pretty cool use of data. I didn't picture that was one of the benefits when we started this initiative, but it's a huge advantage. And fourth, by sharing demand data, we're making it easier for our vendors, for our business partners to use the data to recognize where's demand growing, where's it receding. One of my roles in GSA is our representative to the Ability One Commission. You're familiar with Ability One, yes. Francis, the agency that helps the blind, the severely disabled get new opportunities for business through government contracts. Well, we've started sharing that data initially with them. We've recognized, hey, they are carrying all kinds of costs for items we don't buy. They are underproducing items where we have a growing demand. So sharing demand data, it let them start right-sizing their offerings. And we're now making that data available much more broadly. So that's some really cool and concrete benefits coming out of it. It was a long process to mature the data, to cleanse it, to make it actionable. But we've just announced an expansion. About another 1,900 contractors will be able to opt in. They're all very much producing what we call non-configurable products, standard items. That's where the data is the maturest, the cleanest. So that's our next step in transactional data. And then that over time lets us keep working on the data on the configurable products and on services.
What are you doing to support the workforce that's doing all of this work? I know that's something you're very passionate about, Jeff.
You know, I'm going to go right back to data. I know that's going to shock you.
Right.
One of the things that we did over the last couple of years, we moved to a new learning management system. And in doing that, we were able to pull a lot more demographic data on the workforce and what was going on. One of the things we learned across the civilian agencies, not DoD, they have a very different profile. Across the civilian agencies, we had more than 4 times as many members of our 1102, our contracting folks, over age 60 as under age 30. That is obviously not a healthy ratio. That does not position you for future success. We had components where it was more extreme. We had more over 70 than under age 25. We used that to really build a consensus. We need a new talent development program, one that we've stood up over the last year across GSA. We're trying to build a common curriculum, one way of doing business, a common training, so that we are reaching out to the colleges, to the universities, large, small, HBCU, really bring in entry-level talent, give them professional opportunities, give them common learning program. We brought in a first cohort in February of 30. Second cohort started in July, an additional 80. And we're now working on our third cohort to bring in early next year. We think it's efforts like that where we leverage the data to understand our workforce, look at where do we create the opportunities, where do we build opportunities for them, and try and move that forward. So that's what we're doing.
You can read more about the work Jeff and his team are doing at GSA on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment. The new TV show Better Contracting, Better Outcomes is available on demand now at fedgovtoday.com. You'll learn from top executives at NASA, DoD, Social Security, and more, plus industry experts that are leading government-industry partnerships. Discover their strategies for improving acquisition efficiency, achieving mission success, and driving innovation through federal contracting. Better Contracting, Better Outcomes, presented by the National Contract Management Association. Watch anytime at fedgovtoday.com. Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, FedGov Today is headed to the Association of the U.S. Army's annual meeting, October 14th through the 16th at the Washington Convention Center. The theme is Transforming for a Complex World. Top leaders from the Army and DoD will be there, along with more than 700 exhibits and representatives of armies from around the world. You can read more about it and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 with the Deputy Secretary of State, Richard Verma, and the VA Chief Information Security Officer, Lynette Sherrill. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great week.